Good evening, everyone. And as promised, but rather belated, because I had promised I would do this session a couple of weeks ago, tonight I want to do a tapping session for anyone who has lost a pet. So those of you that know me know that our old lovely cat Harry, who was 17 years old and who made the amazing journey to Spain with us 6 months ago, had to be put down 2 or 3 weeks ago. He was growing a tumour that was getting bigger and bigger, and he was getting quite uncomfortable, so we made that decision to have him put down. And it's been really tough, you know, it was really hard in lots of ways. And it took me back to quite early on in my career as a homeopath, and a woman came to see me, and she had a terrible cough. So she had been coughing pretty much non-stop for 3 or 4 months. And my normal question, which I use in all my therapies, is what happened 3 or 4 months ago? So that's a standard opening question. And she said, oh, nothing really. No, I can't think of anything. Oh, the dog died. And I said, oh, tell me about the dog dying. And that was it. Floodgates opened, and she was just holding on to all this grief. And interestingly, in Chinese medicine, the lungs is where we hold grief. So lung symptoms and coughing can, it's not always, but it can be related to grief. So I thought that was interesting. And actually, over the years working with people, I have treated numerous people who have never been well since the death of a pet. And I was thinking about this, and I discussed it with my husband, because Harry was really his cat. And we came up with a whole host of things that, you know, it is about pets. And I'm taken back to when I was about 23, I was living in Thailand. And back then there was no internet or mobile phones, so communication was by letter. So everything happened quite slowly. And I received a letter from my mum one day telling me that my lovely cat Thursday, whom I had had since I was 3 years old, so she was 20, had died. And I was really, really upset. And my boyfriend at the time looked at me and said, why are you so upset? It's only a cat. And of course, in that moment, I knew that this was never a relationship that was going to last. And I was right. Yeah, it's, you know, it's huge, the whole thing about pets. And I have made a few notes, so I'm going to refer to those too, just so I try and cover everything off. So I think the thing about pets is that they share our space. So of course we are close to our siblings and our friends and our parents, and we have you know, maybe a wonderful relationship or not with them. But when other people, humans in our life, die, it obviously affects us deeply at many levels. But unless it's someone we've actually shared our home with, it is a different thing. Because I think with the thing with a pet is that you get used to their constant presence, the routine that they create in your life. And this is particularly true, well, cats, dogs, anything really. I mean, if you've got a dog and you're walking it a couple of times a day, that gives a really quite a fixed routine actually, doesn't it? But even just the feeding regime, and I know that in my earlier days, in my younger days, when I was pretty down and suffered from depression, sometimes the thing that got me out of bed would be that I knew that the cat needed to be fed and let out. So, you know, that can be quite a good thing to get you moving. But the routine in your life is really important. And then there's the sounds of them. So our Harry was a particularly noisy cat. He was heavy. He was, well, at his full capacity, he was 7.5 kilos, so he was a big old cat. So you could hear him walking down the stairs, jumping off the bed. You know, we used to joke that the house would shake. So it's the noises they make. You know, he was the noisiest drinker, the noisiest eater. He used to make a lot of yowling. If you use the litter tray, he'd be in there for 25 minutes scraping away. You know, and actually, although that can be annoying from time to time, especially in the middle of the night, when it stops, it seems very, very quiet without them around. So it can be a big thing. Then there's smells, which may be, you know, not always great. But, you know, I personally am quite fond of the smell of cat. And it's just having them there and being able to sniff them and stroke them, and their funny little habits and the places that they lie and they sleep and the things they do. And also the physical contact. So there has been quite a lot of research into the benefit, especially for elderly people living alone, having a pet, especially a cat, but any pet, because the physical contact is really important. And in fact, there is research that shows that we benefit from being hugged something like 20 or 30 times a day. I bet most of us don't do that. So it's, you know, just having that physical contact with an animal is massive. You know, it's a really, really big thing, and not to be underrated. So as I said before, they can give us a sense of purpose. They make us have a routine, so we fit in with their routine. They make us smile, they make us laugh. And generally, pets are cheerful. You know, dogs are always pleased to see you, cats maybe less so, but generally they are pretty cheerful creatures as long as they're not in pain. And I think if you've rescued a pet or had it from very young, then you've also got all the memories of how they were very vulnerable and how you cared for them and you were their mummy, if you care to use that. I know some people don't, but a lot of people do. So, you know, if that's your relationship with your pet and then that disappears from your life, it is a bit like losing, you know, your arm. You know, it's massive. And I think, although it's increasingly socially acceptable to be very attached to your pets, a lot of people don't understand. So we had non-pet people staying last weekend, and I told them about Harry dying, and they were like, oh, okay. You know, it didn't really resonate with them because they are not pet people. So it can be quite tricky if you ring your boss and say, I'm sorry, I need 3 days off work because my pet's died, and your boss might be hugely sympathetic and say, take as long as you want, but equally they might say, get back here now, we need you in the office. So it depends who you're talking to, and not everyone will understand. And then I was thinking about how we lose a pet. There are many different ways that we can lose a pet. So it might be that you were forced to rehome your pet. So in fact, your pet's still alive, but they're out of your life. And that's still grief, you know, and I think it's absolutely right to acknowledge that and not try and push it away. And I'll talk a bit about how we grieve in a while, because I am the master of most of the less good ways, let's say. So yes, you might have to rehome a pet for some reason, which is just as distressing really as you know, losing them to death or some other cause. I know people who've had pets that have just disappeared, cats and dogs, and that's really hard because you don't know what's happened to them. You don't know if they've been stolen or hurt or whether they're still alive, you know, and I think that's a real tough one. Then there's sudden death. So it might be that they had an illness that you didn't know about, and you literally, my old next door neighbour just came in one day, her cat was dead on the kitchen floor. So it could be that. Could be that they had a sudden illness and died within a few days, also a big shock. Maybe they went in for a fairly routine operation and died under anaesthetic at the vet. Pretty shocking, because you're expecting to go and collect them and look after them while they recuperate. And then a common cause of animal pet deaths is obviously being hit by cars, which is pretty distressing and a massive shock, and definitely not to be underestimated. And then you've got pets that die slower, you know, through illness. And I think a big thing not to disregard here is the shock of the diagnosis. So you know better than anybody when your pet isn't right. You know when he or she is not well, and you take them along to the vet. But the shock of the diagnosis, it's the same with a human diagnosis. It is a trauma, and it deserves to be acknowledged as such and not just dismissed. So often, certainly with us, I mean, we knew something was going on with Harry, but when we had the diagnosis, you know, it was a massively sad time. for several days, just knowing that there was nothing that could be done, and that he would go sooner or later. So it was, you know, coming to terms with that whilst he was still there. It's really hard. So the diagnosis is a big decision, or a big trauma, but also then the decision of whether you let them just die naturally over time, or whether you decide to have them put down. And equally, you know, hideous, very difficult, such a hard decision to make. And I'm making no judgments over whether people choose one way or another, or when you choose, but it just has to be the right time for you and for your pet. And the thought of whether you've done the best thing, you know, that can really torment us, can't it? You know, did I do the best thing? Did I keep him alive too long or too little, or should I have gone on longer? You know, and I think all of that can really sit with us. So there's also considerations. It's not just you, is it? It's the other people in the house, especially if you've got children, young children, really tough for them. And also other pets, you know, will often be impacted by the death of one. So you may well find their behaviour changes. Good friend of mine had 2 cats who lived together pretty much all their life. One got hit by a car, and the other one's actually become much more cuddly and friendly since that happened. He sort of changed personality. So you do get that impact on other pets and also on other people in the household. And we can get a bit absorbed in our own stuff, our own grief, and not notice what's going on with the others in the house. Conversely, we can be so busy looking after everyone else that we don't look after our own grief. So it can go either way, depending on your character and personality. So just be mindful of what's going on for others as well as yourself. And in terms of grief, so there are, you know, as many ways to grieve as there are humans on the planet, I'm sure. But the big places, or the big types of problems that I see that can actually create illness in people. So the people who were coming to see me saying, I haven't been well since the dog died, although they never said that, they would say, I haven't been well since, you know, Christmas, or what happened then, the dog died. It was either people who didn't grieve at all, so they were dissociated from their grief. Maybe they were embarrassed to grieve. Maybe their partner isn't a particularly animal person. Maybe they didn't feel they would have support around them if they were to grieve. So often I found that to be the case. So people who had really, you know, sort of put this whole bottle of grief, this animal they'd had in their life for years and years, and just sort of bunged it somewhere. And I'm afraid to say, when you do that, sooner or later it catches up with you. And I know this from personal experience. And it makes you ill, because it's a natural human process to go through grief. And if you don't do that, if you bottle it up and shove it somewhere, it will come out in symptoms of some sort or other, depending on your own susceptibility. So I'm afraid that will happen. And the other thing that I think is potentially a problem is when months after the event you are still stuck in the grief, you are still sobbing uncontrollably and you cannot get through it. So you're kind of stuck in your grief. And equally that's quite life limiting, but also it means you need probably a bit of help just on moving through that. So today I invite you to tune into your grief. Chances are you don't really. You might have a picture of your beautiful late pet somewhere, or maybe several, but there's a strong chance that you don't really acknowledge your grief and what you've been through, and all the emotions associated with that. So you know, there can be so many things. There can be guilt that you didn't do the right thing. You might just be distraught. You might feel desperately lonely. You know, there are so many different emotions that you might be feeling. But I'm going to invite you to tune in to the biggest thing around it today. If you've got a picture of your pet to hand, that would be great. Have a look at that. And, you know, just have a look and just see what emotions come up in you when you look at or think about your pet that's no longer with you. So just notice how you feel. So I just invite you, maybe we'll just start with a couple of breaths, because I'm quite keen on that. Just inviting you to breathe in for 3 and out for 5. Let's do that once more. And I'm assuming if you're sitting, I just want you to notice your feet on the ground, okay? Just wriggle your toes. And at any time, if you feel overwhelmed with emotion during this process, I just invite you to come back to your feet on the ground, just wriggling your toes, just connecting with the floor, because it'll take you a bit out of your emotions and just make it a little easier to process. And we're just going to start by tapping on the side of the hand here. We call this the karate chop or side of hand. And I'm just going to invite you to tune into the emotions that come up when you think about the pet that's no longer with you, or pets, because there may be several. And just think about them. Think about the space that they've left in your life and the qualities that they had that you really miss the most. What was it about them? What is it that you really miss about them? Is it the routine? Is it the companionship? Is it their amazingly soft coat or fur? Is it the way they used to jump on you in the morning and tell you they wanted breakfast? Whatever it is, what do you miss the most? What's the one thing you really, really miss about them? Okay, and just notice what you feel when you think about that. Where are you feeling that? Chances are you're feeling emotion down the center line of your body. It's usually, can be head, it's more commonly throat, chest, stomach, abdomen. So just notice where you're feeling that emotion. And I just want you to score that emotion out of 10, with 10 being really high level of emotion. I'm really feeling that. And you might want to give that emotion a name. It might be grief, but it might be something else. It might be loneliness. It might be a feeling of despair. It could be anything. So just give it a name, whatever's right for you. So I like to enable people, facilitate people to feel the emotions that are right for them rather than me just giving you a script. So tune into that and just give yourself permission, as uncomfortable as I know it is, to feel that for a moment, and just tap on the top of your head. Keep breathing, don't forget, a lot of people hold their breath doing this. Tap on the inside of the eyebrow, keeping your awareness on the emotion, the name of it, and how it feels. And tapping on the outside of the eye. The emotion may have a colour for you, and if that's right, then notice what colour it is. So just keep your attention on the emotion, the colour of the emotion. As you tap under the eye, just sensing into it, noticing what you really feel and maybe what you've held in or haven't let yourself hold in for all this time. Tap under the nose, just tuning into that. Keep breathing. Tap under the mouth on the chin. And just notice how you're feeling, what the emotion is when you think about the thing you miss most without your pet there. Tapping under the collarbone. The thing that you really miss the most. The one thing that you would give anything to have back. Just the smell of them or the sound of them or their amazing purr. Tap under the arm. What is it about them that you miss them most? And what emotion does that bring up for you? And what's the feeling and where are you feeling it? Just notice all those things, tapping across the wrist. And tell yourself that you're loving and respecting yourself enough today to do this. You know, you really are doing a great thing for yourself. And maybe that late pet would be approving of you looking after yourself in this way. Tap next to the thumbnail and then each fingernail in turn. Just keeping your attention on the emotion you're feeling and where you're feeling it. And you are doing great. Whatever's happening, it's exactly what's meant to happen. You're doing really well. Give yourself credit for just spending this bit of time on yourself, looking after yourself. This is self-care. Allowing ourselves to tune into our emotions, really feel into them, and then let them go. And tap on the back of the hand. This is a really nice point. And just press there and just take a nice breath in for 3. And out for 5. Excellent, well done. And I'd just like you to tune in now to the number of intensity. So we started with thinking about one thing that your late pet did that you really miss the most. And that came with an emotion and a place and maybe a colour. So just tune into that now and think about the intensity of that. What number is that now? So has the number gone up, down, or stayed the same? And I would recommend if it stayed the same and it's above a 3, then you pause and just go round and do that again. So just repeat that whole process again, tapping through the points whilst tuning in. So if your number's a little bit lower now, right, we'll do another round of tapping in any case. And there might be other aspects of your pet that are coming up now. So the analogy of an onion is really commonly used when we talk about anything holistic health in any respect, whether that's emotions or physical health. So if you began with really missing the purr of your amazing cat, and maybe you feel okay about that now, you think, yeah, he had an amazing purr, but actually it's okay. And when I think about that now, yeah, there's a bit of intensity, but it's only a 2, and that's all right. But there might be something else now. So imagine we've peeled off the outer layer of the onion, and there may be something else underneath. And that might be guilt or sadness or loneliness or any other emotion that you could possibly imagine. You know, there's thousands of them. So chances are there might be something else. Maybe there's guilt that you didn't get to the vet soon enough, or guilt that you kept them alive too long, or you didn't keep them alive long enough, or you didn't do all you could have done, and if only you had not let them out that night, or whatever it was. So there may well be another emotion here. So let's tune into that. Let's go to the next emotion. If your number on the first thing is still high, just work on that. Continue working on that. So breathing in for 3 and out for 5. And then once again, just notice your feet on the ground, wiggle your toes. Come back to the feet if you feel really overwhelmed with emotion here. So let's tune into whatever the emotion is now. What do you feel? Perhaps there was something you felt you could have done that you didn't do, something you did that you shouldn't have done, whatever it is. Doesn't matter, just tune into that. A deep loneliness, a big gulf in your life, your whole routine has gone to pot because you haven't got to get up and walk the dog anymore, whatever it is. Just tune in to whatever that space is in your life, emptiness, and just notice if there is a colour or a shape to that emotion. Might sound really weird, but nearly everybody comes up with colour. Great. And just say to yourself, I've got this emotion, but I did the best I could. I always did the best I could. Even though I feel like this right now, I did the absolute best I could. And by being here, doing this tapping now, I am practicing self-care. I'm looking after myself. Tap on the top of the head. Keep tuned into the emotion and notice the intensity. So give it a number. Inside of the eyebrow, just noticing the intensity, the number, the colour, the shape, the location outside the eye. Keep breathing. Easy to forget. And under the nose. And under the mouth. Under the collarbone, keeping your focus and awareness on the emotion that you've got, the place where you're feeling it, and whether there's a colour or a shape to it. Tap under the arm, just keeping your attention and your focus there, and tapping across the wrist. And breathe. Focusing on the emotion that you're feeling, and just know that you are doing a great thing for yourself right now. Tapping next to each finger in turn. Excellent. And then we'll just tap or press that point on the back of the hand, and just once again tune into where that emotion was, where you were feeling it, the colour, the shape, and just notice what the number is now that's associated with it. Has it gone up or down or stayed the same? None of those are wrong. It's fine. If the number's above about a 3, I'd highly recommend doing another round of tapping on that again, because some of this might be deep ingrained stuff that you really need to spend a bit of time working on. And the other thing that happens, that I call the Princess Diana effect, is that when we start tuning into our grief over one death, let's say it's death or loss, lots of others can come into play as well. So sometimes people get hugely upset over the death of a pet, but actually a large part of their grieving is also for their mother that died 2 years ago, or something, some other loss that they haven't really properly grieved for. So it does all get quite bundled up together, and that's okay. We're human beings with very complicated emotions, and that's fine. So if you feel that there is still more to do on that, there's another layer of emotion, just keep working through it. You don't have to do it all now. You can come back, watch the video again on replay, and just keep working through it. Play it as often as you need to. You might need to play it every day for a week or two to really clear out all those layers of the onion until you're down to the little bit in the middle. And do that. Really encourage you to do that, because we don't resolve all our grief in 1.5 hour. It just doesn't happen like that, especially if we're carrying it a lot, for a long time or really, really deeply. So I want to finish this session with something that may set you off, so it may make you cry. And that's not why I'm doing it. I don't set out to make people cry. But I want to give you the opportunity to have a last conversation with your pet. Okay. So you may well want to close your eyes for this, and possibly have tissues to hand. And I just want you to imagine a beautiful place. This may be a place that's real for you, or it may just be an imaginary place that just feels beautiful, just feels peaceful. It'll almost certainly be in nature, but it may not, may be an inside place. But normally, the beautiful places are somewhere, a beach or a hill or a wood or by a river, something like that. So just take yourself, as it were, to this beautiful place. And I just want you to imagine that as you're there, your adored pet comes into that space, and you may want to bring them with somebody. So if you have a deeply loved relative who's no longer with you, a grandparent, an aunt, a parent, a friend, an angel, doesn't matter, you may want to have your pet come with that other person. And the reason for that is then it's easier to say goodbye to them later and let them go. And so let's just bring in your beautiful pet, whoever it is. And I just want you to take this opportunity in your head, or out loud if you prefer, to say all the things you'd like to say to them. Just say everything you wish you could say to them. Whether it's how much you love them, how much you miss them, how grateful you are for all the love and care that they gave you and the companionship. So share all the stuff you'd like to say to them, including gratitude. Gratitude's really, really important. And I'm just going to give you a little moment to do that. And you can just pause if you're watching on replay and just spend as long as you need to. Don't get too swamped in this. And it may sound far-fetched to the left brain practical types out there, but I'm going to ask you to give your pet the opportunity to say to you anything he or she would like to say back. What would they like to say to you about the amazing life you gave them? And again, if they need a little bit more time, just take it. And we're going to ask the person who brought them in, whoever it was, to take care of them, which of course we know they will. And we're going to say goodbye, and we're going to let them go. So this might be sad. No, it might create tears, but it's not necessarily sad. So it may well feel like a real nice conclusion of things. And so say goodbye and let that scene of the beautiful place fall away, and bring yourself back into the space where you're sitting. Open your eyes if they were closed. Just notice your feet on the floor once again. Take a couple of breaths. And just once again, I just want you to express your gratitude to that pet for all the benefits, all the amazing things they brought into your world. And your world would not have been the same, and you would not be the same if you had never known them. So just be grateful and tell them again, once again, how grateful you are for that opportunity to have met them. Okay, so may well be quite an emotional session tonight, and look after yourself. So you might feel quite tired, especially if you've had a bit of a cry. And that's fine. So you might want to take yourself off for a nice early night, or a nice long warm bath, or, you know, just look after yourself. You practice self-care by being here, so just continue to practice it for a little bit longer, just as you process everything that's happened. And as I said before, I'd really encourage you, if you feel there's more on this to do, or there's other pets, then come back, visit it again. It'll be on YouTube as well as on Facebook. And I would like to express my gratitude to you for joining me here, and for all the support. We had such immense support when we had to say goodbye to Harry. We had amazing messages, and it was a really tough time. We were, only 6 months in a new country, and he made the incredible journey with us. So it was a really big deal for us, and it's been tough, but clearly now things are easier. So thank you for coming tonight, and I will see you again very soon. I'm sure I'll have another great subject. If there's anything you'd like to hear about, like to have a little tapping session on, however improbable, let me know, because I can usually adapt most things. All right, good evening and lots of love to you all.